Hi, everybody. I'm Dumi, um, the founder of Thekga Movement. Thank you very much for the opportunity to introduce the work that we do with Water Hyacinth, and thank you very much to Jackie for inviting us and having us here. Um, at Thekga Movement, we are a social enterprise, and we work with a fiber or a plant species that is a notorious nuisance. Anybody who's ever interacted with Water Hyacinth will have a problem with it. The famous case of Water Hyacinth is the Hartbeespoort Dam, where you go there and you'd see this green plant that's covered the entire dam. And for many, many years, over decades, the Department of Environmental Affairs, as well as the Department of Water and Sanitation, have tried to win the battle over Water Hyacinth. And it's just not been possible because of technical parameters around the level of its spread, the seed banks, as well as our water quality issues, stemming from pollution. So over 10 years ago, we met Water Hyacinth at Mohulasan when I was working for another company that was dealing with wastewater treatment. And we obviously couldn't do anything with that because we worked with microbes that would add more nutrients. So it was a no-go area for what we were doing. But I was so interested in this Water Hyacinth because I just couldn't fathom how it's spreading so much. And when you do research and you look at case studies in Asia, for example, Vietnam, it's used for purpose, for example, craft production. We then approached the Department of Environmental Affairs, and over 10 to 15 years ago, the answer was no. There's no opportunity for value-added products made out of the Water Hyacinth, which we call beneficiation, simply because the management and control protocol then was chemical spraying with with herbicide spraying. So almost 10 years later, there was a partnership entered into between our Department of Water and Sanitation and the Dutch water authorities called the Blue Deal Partnership. And through that, they then called me to say, Dumi, are you still interested in Water Hyacinth? I was like, wow, geez, okay. Yes. So the chosen site to pilot community development using the Water Hyacinth was in Springs, which is the Blesbokspruit wetland. And why that particular wetland was so important is because we needed to rehabilitate it because it's in conservation. There are different protocols. And that particular wetland was under the Ramsar, is declared a Ramsar site, which is a wetland of global importance. And our mission was to rehabilitate it because of the Water Hyacinth invasion, as well as pollution and the degradation of that particular wetland. It lost its status. So through our interventions, we decided to start with the lowest hanging fruit that didn't require a lot of capital, simply because it was still in pilot phase, where we studied the Water Hyacinth and we realized that it is a sustainable material. We gathered a community, 30 women, in the Slovo informal settlement who could walk across to the wetland, and we trained them on basket weaving and crafts. So, but before I get into what we did, I'll just take you, through the environmental impacts of Water Hyacinth and why it's called an alien invasive plant. Is because one, it's not native to South Africa. It comes from the Amazon basin. It was introduced to our country in the 1930s for cosmetic purposes. Somebody thought it was beautiful and introduced it to a pond, and decades, in fact, centuries later, it spread across the majority of our water bodies. It blocks waterways. It chokes biodiversity. So areas where there's a lot of Water Hyacinth, we've lost a lot of biodiversity, underground biodiversity, animals, fish, as well as bird life, because habitats are very important. So the Blesbokspruit wetland was a bird sanctuary, or is, but we've lost a lot of bird species. And from a material perspective, it is sustainable. It's biodegradable, such that we've even used it in other application where it's proven to biodegrade. And then through the community work that we've been doing, we've been able to have a great impact on local artisans who are unemployed, sitting at home, and didn't really know what to do other than looking for domestic work, which would come as and when. So we trained them on basket weaving, and we started by first harvesting the Water Hyacinth. And then from there on, we'd have to take all the stems, cherry pick them, grade them, sun dry them, and bundle them. So this is the water hyacinth where it's bundled. And then from there on, from the drying, we would create a frame. Because the water hyacinth material is very brittle, it's almost like paper. It's very difficult to get it to stand up on its own. So we created a structure where we would then warp the water hyacinth around the structure to create baskets, which are now used in the main we distribute to garden centers because they are used for pot plant covers. And these are some of our ladies. This is Granny, this is Dianca. And so since then, they've organized themselves into cooperatives where they are now we're giving them entrepreneurial skills such that they can become our contract manufacturers, where you worry about, creating designs and, giving them the training and the weaving protocols and looking for markets and distribution opportunities, which they then, as cooperatives, we fundraise for them such that they can then, do all the production. Just like in the, traditional textile industry where you'd have your CMTs, you're developing them into, those kind of opportunities for them. So the question around, can hyacinth be used for textile? Yes, it can. It's quite a vigorous process. Where we have started now was by, tearing the stems into thin pieces and looming it through a warp. But that is not for, textile. The opportunity to turn water hyacinth into textile requires a process where the stems in their green form are taken through some machine called a decorticator, which means it goes into that machine and the water is removed, the cellulose is removed, and then you get the fibers that remain. From there on, that it would have to go through a treating process where then it gets carded, and from there on, then you have a bit of yarn that could then be spun into fiber. That is a process that we've been exploring. We did a bit of R&D, but through a manual process, we realized that for us to scale this, we would need quite a bit of heavy industrial machinery, but it is possible. And why we did the R&D is that we got a request from a Dutch company about a year and a half ago where they wanted to do geotextiles out of the water hyacinth for soil erosion control. And through that, we were able to build a file and a dossier where we've got the protocol and, the process to turn this water hyacinth into an actual textile and adapt it to different applications, be it geotextiles for more, for conservation and soil erosion control, and also to process it finer and blend with your cottons and etc. to then make it a nice soft fabric that can be used for textiles that we can then use. It's very important that we come up with solutions and innovations around how we can beneficiate the water hyacinth at scale, because our logic is simple at Thekga. The more products are made, especially at scale, the more we're able to harvest the water hyacinth, and the more we're able to harvest, that's where we achieve the ecological restoration. And it's a win-win situation for the environment, the conservation of our water resources, and sustainable fabrics and, a new trend in fashion that could emerge. And so the broader impact of our mission really is, to contribute to the circular economy. What I mentioned right now is, the more product is made, the more, the environmental benefits, and the more we're also able to create empowerment and local economic development. The cycle closes, and that's the circularity that our business talks to. We also empower women and local women who don't have employment opportunity. Oh, because the 30 women that we've trained in the Slovo community, seeing them grow and develop into their own businesses, where then you have economic multiplication, because then they would then employ other people, and then we move into other regions, an area that we're passionate about. The question around social enterprise not being a legal entity is very challenging, because we either are a PTY or an NPC. And Daphne, who's our partner, is setting up our foundation where we want to multiply the impact that we're doing by establishing an NPC that will then go into homes of victims of gender-based violence, where we'd impart on them these skills such that when they leave, because they usually stay there for a maximum of 3 months, and thereafter they don't really have a plan. So if we're able to transfer these skills to them, knowing that on their exit there's an opportunity for them to start their own businesses or plug into the ecosystem that we already have at the Bestbox wetland, because we have an environmental center there where the ladies work, they're able to have hope. We want to turn this nuisance and this crisis into a beacon of hope, not just for economic restoration, but for society and the communities in which we operate. And in that way, that's how we also envisage the connection of craft and fashion by, bringing and reinstating, traditional skills. Because, weaving is an African thing, in our particular case with basketry, but incorporating textile warping and looming into that, we're able to, develop communities, develop skills, create jobs, but also save the environment through the work that we're doing. And that's really what it is. From a nuisance that nobody likes, everybody cringes when you talk about water hyacinth, until you show them that here's a basket that's been made out of it. Here's a piece of warped fabric that's been made, or loomed fabric that's been made. We also have other applications that we use for water hyacinth. We create a solid biofuel and charcoal out of the water hyacinth, but that's a story for another day. And the amazing wonders of what can happen with the water hyacinth if really we all gather around, there's enough support. In fact, the name Thekga means support, and Insipedi, which is my language. And the reason why we call it Thekga is we're creating an ecosystem of not just women supporting each other, but us through all our efforts supporting the 3 pillars of sustainability. And for more inquiries, those who want to get involved, have ideas, you're welcome to contact us here. Thank you.
There was a question there first.
Hi. I just wanted to find out, have we found ways to grow the water hyacinths in like more controlled environments? This is to say that obviously in order for ecological restoration, there would need to be some sort of demand for it, for us to produce textiles and such. So now when we look at that demand, how do we balance the demand with the ecological restoration?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a very popular question that we get asked, especially with the work that we do around supply risk. I think your question talks a lot to supply risk. Water hyacinth is a category 2 alien invader, meaning that it cannot be grown. We are talking to the Department of Environmental Affairs around whether, just like with wattle, there are farmers who are able to grow wattle in a controlled environment, granted that they were already growing the wattle before it was categorized as a category 2 and 3 alien invader. But in terms of supply risk, the counter argument around whether there'll be opportunities in the future to grow it in a controlled environment, the answer is always met with, well, hyacinth is a problem right now. The seed banks are estimated to be around for another 30 years, and it's only getting worse because we have water quality issues. Forgive me if I get too technical, but the reality is that we have a lot of, from an infrastructure perspective, we have a lot of, let me put it this way, our infrastructure is degraded and it's not being maintained, right? And this is a DWS issue. So because of that, there's a lot of effluent that comes in from industry, from communities, a lot of pollution. So now that adds nutrients to the water. We already have almost 30 years of seed bank in the water. It almost fertilizes the seed banks. Like now, during the rainy seasons, when it starts to rain. And then when you see that beautiful purple flower, we in conservation know that this is where the problems are going to start, because the seeds start dropping again. So you already have 30 years as a base, and then every year it keeps growing and you have more droppings. So that means that pushes it out to another 40, 50, 60 years. So the conclusion is that hyacinth, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, is here to stay with us forever. The conversation has moved from eradication to management and control, and part of that is how do we create an industry out of it?
There was another question.
It's actually been answered.
Sure, this is so fascinating. Yes.
I'm actually curious how it feels as a yarn. What would you say compares to it as like a competitive fiber?
I wish I could answer that question, especially with a sample. We don't have a sample because we're still in the early stages of that research. But raw as it is, so once we've extracted it either through chemical extraction or through a mechanical extraction, right now, because it's not refined and it's not gone through the carding processes to make it like a silver, it feels very rustic, like a jute or a hessian type of fabric, but it can be further processed to make it more softer and yeah.
Related question, the baskets that you spoke about that are being produced at the moment, what do they feel like? What, are they like willow? That's what I'm going to what are they like?
Okay. We've got them outside. You're welcome to interact with them, but to answer your question, I'd compare that more to a seagrass type of texture.
Just with the processing of what you mentioned in the course of the decadicator, I'm just curious, like what goes into extracting that cellulose and stuff, because I know, like the cotton, for example, there's so much water that goes into the processing of it, even though it is potentially a sustainable fiber. So are there any risks in terms of like if you were to take it to the next level of production environmentally through that process? Because I suppose with basket weaving, there's less processing to get it into that finer fiber.
Okay, that's a very interesting question. So with the decorticating, when we try to do an extraction, a mechanical extraction of the water hyacinth fiber, it actually is more beneficial to extract it while it's still wet, so fresh out the water. That means that we're not actually using water to process this. We actually, as we're extracting it, there's a lot of water that's coming out. So it would be a question around designing a machine that could maybe during harvesting also do that extraction such that we send water back to the system as opposed to it being removed and it dries and the water just evaporates in any case.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, what happens to the cellulose?
Cellulose. Okay. The cellulose, we haven't really explored uses for the cellulose. Well, look, with the other products that we make out of the water hyacinth, we make briquettes, ecologs, where we compress it and we create ecologs. That's an alternative to firewood, and for industrial use and boilers, they would use that. That's an application there. There we use the cellulose to actually do the binding instead of using an artificial or an external binder. With regards to textiles, that cellulose, if it's extracted during harvesting, would probably go back to the water system or the water body. But if it's extracted outside of the water system, that cellulose would have to be captured in the water, and then I guess additional R&D would have to be conducted to further extract that cellulose from the water to see what else could be used from it.
Okay, we're going to have Star. Is it a short question with a short answer?
So, first, thank you. Also, it's taking insightful for me. I actually haven't gotten into this, but the question I have, are there other people who are doing the same research in the space as to the uses of water hyacinth?
They not. I haven't come across any particularly for textiles.
Yeah.
There are a lot of use cases for fertilizer. A lot of people who are in the space or coming into the space have an interest in fertilizer because it's got high phosphate levels. But in terms of textiles and weaving and crafts, in South Africa, that is, we're amongst the first. Yeah. I don't know of anyone else here.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, well done.
Exactly.